right, so you've heard about Bittensor, right, with its super commodities and its network that's already making things happen.
Yeah, Bittensor is definitely making waves.
But now there's this new player, Hypertensor, and it's making some bold promises, especially when it comes to security.
A lot of investors are asking, is it worth the risk?
Yeah, is Hypertensor the smarter play, the safer bet for, for your investments?
That's the big question. I mean, we've seen Bittensor, right? It's got its quirks, but it's working. It's producing actual value. Hypertensor, though, it's still very early days.
It is a shiny new toy.
Yeah, it is. But is it all hype? Or can it actually deliver on what it's promising? The security, the truly decentralized system, all of that.
Let's break down, starting with that security piece.
Yeah.
Because Hypertensor is laser focused on it, and they've got this thing called proof of inference. POOPI. Think of it like a lie detector, but for AI.
A lie detector for AI. Interesting. But is it really needed? I mean, Bittensor has its Yuma consensus, right? And that's designed to reward the best AI contributors. It's like a meritocracy for AI, making sure the best algorithms get to the top.
True, but remember those weight copying issues Bittensor had to deal with? People figuring out how to game the system.
Yeah, that was a bit of a headache for them.
It was. But Bittensor did tackle it. They came up with this commit reveal system, like a sealed bid, forces everyone to show their hand.
Right. They learned and they adapted, which is good.
They did.
Well,
But Hypertensor's taking a different approach. They're trying to prevent those kind of problems before they even start. With this proof of inference, it's not just about trusting that people are being honest. It's verifying the results themselves, like having independent auditors scrutinizing every single calculation.
I see. So more checks and balances. But doesn't that make things more complicated? Doesn't it slow things down? I mean, Bittensor's all about efficiency, getting those AI services out there fast. Speed is everything in this market.
That's where Hypertensor's hybrid consensus model comes in. They're using a combination of Babe and Grandpa. Might sound like a strange pair, but they work well together.
Yeah.
Babe makes sure transactions are processed quickly. Think of it like sending a text. And then Grandpa comes in and guarantees that those transactions are final, tamper-proof, like a contract. You get speed and security.
I see. But let's not forget about Bittensor's EVM compatibility. Being able to tap into that huge Ethereum ecosystem, that's a big deal. Developers, interoperability, all of that. Hypertensor, well, they're still building their network, and they really compete with that.
That's a valid concern. But Hypertensor's designed to be interoperable from the ground up. It's not just about connecting to Ethereum. It's about connecting to many different blockchains, many different data sources. They're thinking bigger. Imagine an internet, but for AI.
An internet for AI, ambitious, almost utopian, you could say. But Bittensor, they're delivering real value right now with their super commodities, protein folding, financial predictions, even bandwidth. All tradable, all generating revenue today. That's tangible.
No argument there. Bittensor's carved out a space for itself. But what about that centralized root network, the one in Bittensor's Yuma consensus? For investors who are really looking for decentralization, that's got to be a red flag.
It is a point of debate, for sure. That root network does have a lot of control, which raises questions about fairness, censorship, all of that. But in fairness to Bittensor, they are aware of this, and they are working towards a more decentralized model with dynamic TO.
Right, that shift of power to the token holders, trying to give them more control. But you could argue that Hypertensor's starting point, with its one token, one vote system, just feels like a more trustworthy foundation, like real-world democracy.
I get that perspective. That commitment to community-driven governance is attractive. But remember, they're brand new. Their system hasn't been tested in the real world yet. Bittensor, they've faced challenges. They've adapted. That willingness to evolve, it shows they're serious.
It does make you wonder, though, is Bittensor just playing catch-up? Hypertensor's got those principles built in from the start?
It's a good point. Maybe it's a question of established practicality versus, idealistic potential. Bittensor's the known factor. Hypertensor, it's the newcomer with the big dreams. Tough choice for investors.
It really is. And that's why we're here, to dissect it all, to help you make an informed decision. Now, let's dig a little deeper into these super commodities.
Yeah.
What exactly are they, and how do they fit into this whole decentralized AI marketplace?
Okay, so think of super commodities as AI-powered services that you can trade. Buy, sell, like an app store, but for AI. Need some complex protein folded for, your next big medical breakthrough? Bittensor can do that. Want some AI-driven predictions on the stock market? There's a super commodity for that. You could even trade bandwidth as a super commodity, turning unused internet capacity into something you can buy and sell. It's this whole idea of turning AI services into assets, like digital commodities.
It's clever. But how does that actually translate into value for investors? Are people really using these things, buying and selling them?
Yeah, they are. You've got this growing ecosystem of developers building these specialized AI services, and there's definitely a demand for them. Researchers, businesses, even individuals. It's still early, for sure, but the potential's there.
But some people argue that this whole super commodity approach, it's too narrow, too focused. That Hypertensor, with its more general platform, it can support more types of AI. So it's more adaptable, more future-proof. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. Bittensor's definitely specializing, but I think it's a smart move, at least for now. They're going after specific markets where there's already a need. They're showing that this decentralized AI thing, it can work, building momentum. Hypertensor's approach is much broader, but who knows if they'll get the same level of adoption, from developers and users.
So it's focused execution versus a grand vision. But let's go back to that root network for a second. That centralized root network in Bittensor's system, that's got to be a concern for investors who really want that decentralization, right?
It definitely raises some eyebrows. I mean, the root network does hold a lot of power, which, makes you think about fairness and censorship. It's kind of like having, I don't know, a king who can just overrule everyone else. But to their credit, Bittensor knows this is an issue, and they're working on it with that dynamic TAO we talked about.
Yeah, that shift towards giving more control to the token holders. But again, some would say that Hypertensor, starting with that one token, one vote system, it just seems more trustworthy from the beginning.
I get it. Hypertensor looks good on paper, but we haven't seen it in action. Bittensor, they've had those struggles, they've learned, and they're changing. That actually says something, don't you think?
Right. It shows they're committed.
Yeah.
So maybe Bittensor's journey, all those bumps in the road, maybe that's actually a strength.
Could be. It's like comparing a brand new car, all of the latest gadgets, with a classic car that's been carefully tuned and upgraded over time. Both have their appeal. Depends what you're looking for.
Okay. Let's talk security. We touched on that weight copying issue, how Bittensor dealt with it with the commit reveal thing. But some investors might still be hesitant. How can they be sure Bittensor's learned their lesson? That there won't be more exploits?
Well, no system's perfect, right? That's just the reality. But the way they responded to that weight copying thing shows that they're taking it seriously. They're actively looking for problems, coming up with new solutions, always trying to make the platform more secure.
But Hypertensor's argument is that this proof of inference, verifying the actual math, not just people's behavior, that's a more fundamental approach to security. Like building a fortress, multiple layers of defense. What's your response to that?
Well, to me, proof of inference is a trade-off. It does add security, but it also adds complexity. It's like having guards check every single package that comes into a building. Yeah, it's secure, but it's also slower, more expensive. Bittensor's being more practical, focusing on the most likely attacks while keeping things efficient.
So Bittensor, focusing on those practical measures, being willing to adapt, that makes them a safer bet for investors who are worried about risk.
I think so. They've shown they care about security, and they've proven they can fix problems. And let's not forget, Bittensor's built on a pretty solid foundation. Years of work went into this thing. Hypertensor, it's promising, but it's still very new. We haven't seen it tested in the wild.
That's true. So let's talk about Hypertensor's plans. They've talked about this multi-chain future, connecting all these different blockchains and data sources. Sounds amazing, but how realistic is it? What kind of challenges are they going to face?
Well, everyone's talking about interoperability these days. It's a big goal. Connecting all these different blockchains could unlock a lot of value, but it's not simple. You've got technical challenges, different ways of reaching consensus, even political issues that could get in the way. Hypertensor is going to have to navigate all of that very carefully.
But they're using Substrate, right? That's supposed to be good for interoperability.
Yeah, Substrate is a good tool. It's flexible, but it's not magic. To build those bridges between blockchains, you need collaboration, you need standards, and you need a lot of really hard work. Hypertensor has a good team, but they'll need strong partnerships. They'll need to work closely with other projects to make this happen.
So it's a great vision, but investors need to understand this is a long game. It's going to take time, and there's no guarantee it'll work out.
Yeah. It's like planning an expedition to a new continent. You need a map, you need the right gear, you need a skilled team, but you've got to be ready for the unexpected.
Okay, so we've covered security, governance, all that technical stuff. But let's talk about the people. Both Bittensor and Hypertensor, they're driven by communities. Developers, researchers, users. How do these communities compare?
The community is everything in this world. It's what makes or breaks a decentralized platform. Both Bittensor and Hypertensor, they've got active communities, people building applications, people doing research, people just using the platforms and giving feedback. It's early days, but both communities are growing.
But are there differences in the culture, in what they're focusing on? Are they attracting different types of people?
That's interesting. I'd say Bittensor's community is more focused on building real-world things, practical applications. They like that super commodity model, the idea of making money from AI services. Hypertensor's community seems more research-focused. They like that emphasis on security, on decentralization. They want to push the limits of what AI can do and create a truly collaborative system.
So Bittensor, it's like a bustling marketplace. Hypertensor, it's more like a research lab.
That's a good way to put it. Both approaches have their merits. It all comes down to whether they can attract and keep talent, build cool applications, and create a thriving ecosystem.
Okay, so back to our investors. We've gone through the details, the good and the bad. But what does all this mean for someone who's thinking about investing in Bittensor or Hypertensor?
It comes down to how much risk are you willing to take? What are your goals? Bittensor, it's established, it's got a track record, it's making money, people are using it, they're building something solid, but they've got those centralized aspects and they've had security issues. Hypertensor, they're the new kid on the block. They've got this big vision for a secure, decentralized AI world. They're moving fast, but they're still unproven.
The classic investor dilemma. The safe bet or the one with the potential to explode?
Exactly. And there's no right answer. Do you believe in specialized AI services and Bittensor's marketplace? Or do you see AI as something more general, more collaborative, like Hypertensor's vision? It's about matching your investment strategy to your vision of the future.
Before we move on, let's talk intellectual property. How do Bittensor and Hypertensor handle ownership and sharing of AI models, of data?
That's a great question. They're actually quite different. Bittensor leans towards a more traditional proprietary approach. The developers who create those super commodities, they own the rights to their work. They decide how to license it, how to make money from it.
So, like the App Store. Developers own their apps, but they distribute them through a central platform.
Exactly. It's got advantages. Developers are motivated to create high-quality stuff because they can profit from it. But it also might limit collaboration, stifle open innovation.
And Hypertensor.
Yeah.
They seem to be more open source, encouraging sharing and collaboration on models and data. How does that work?
Hypertensor's all about this shared knowledge base. Developers can contribute their models, their data. Everyone can benefit. It's about creating this network effect of innovation.
Like a giant open source library for AI.
Yeah, exactly. It could really speed up development, break down those walls that slow things down. But it also raises questions about, how to reward people fairly, how to make sure the quality stays high.
So a balance, rewarding individual work, but also encouraging this open collaboration.
Exactly. Both platforms are trying to find that balance. They realize that the future of AI is probably going to be a mix of both, the proprietary and the open source. It depends on what you're trying to do.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Technical stuff, governance, the communities. But let's step back. We're talking about decentralized AI. This technology could change everything. What about the ethical side of all this? What we need to be careful about as this technology grows? How are Bittensor and Hypertensor addressing these concerns?
That's so important. As AI gets more powerful, we have to think about things like bias, transparency, accountability. We need to make sure these systems are used responsibly, ethically, that everyone benefits, not just a select few.
So it's not just about the tech, it's about making sure it serves humanity.
Right. And both Bittensor and Hypertensor, they get it. They're both trying to build platforms that are transparent, accountable, and open to everyone.
But how are they doing that? What are they actually doing to make sure this happens?
Well, for example, they're both working hard to make sure their AI models are fair, that they're not biased against certain groups of people. They're being transparent by making their algorithms and data available for anyone to see so that experts can check for problems.
So it's about building trust, making sure the system is accountable from the very beginning.
Exactly. And it's not a one-time thing. This is an ongoing process. We need to keep talking about these things as AI evolves.
All right, time for the big question. Which one's the better investment, Bittensor or Hypertensor?
That's the question everyone wants answered. And honestly, there's no easy answer.
So what should people be thinking about? What advice would you give?
Well, first of all, don't just follow the hype. Do your homework. Understand the tech, the teams, their vision for the future. Look past the marketing and figure out what's real.
So don't just buy the sizzle. Make sure there's stake.
Exactly. And second, think about your own goals. Are you looking for quick wins or are you in it for the long haul? Can you handle the risk of a new market, or do you want something more established?
So know yourself, know what you want.
Right. And lastly, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Decentralized AI is still young. There's room for more than one winner. Investing in both could be a good strategy.
So diversify,
Yeah.
hedge your bets.
Exactly. And never stop learning. This space is changing fast, so stay informed, be ready to adapt.
Okay, we've given you the facts, the pros and cons, some advice. But before we wrap up, here's something to think about. What if the future isn't about Bittensor versus Hypertensor? What if it's about them working together, combining their strengths to create something even bigger?
That's a really cool idea. Imagine Bittensor's marketplace combined with Hypertensor's security and decentralization. Or maybe we'll see brand new platforms built on top of what they started.
So maybe the question isn't who wins, but how can they work together to make decentralized AI work for everyone?
Exactly. And that's a future worth investing in.
Yeah. And it's exciting to see how they're evolving too. Bittensor, they're really pushing that EVM compatibility, opening up all sorts of possibilities for developers who are already working with Ethereum.
Like connecting two powerful worlds.
Exactly. It could really boost the whole decentralized AI market. And that brings us back to interoperability. It's not just about building these separate platforms. It's about connecting them, making them work together.
Yeah.
And that's where Hypertensor's vision, that multi-chain future, it gets really interesting.
Yeah. Hypertensor, with its modular design and substrate, it's got a lot of flexibility. They're not just talking about Ethereum, they're talking about connecting to all sorts of blockchains, creating this network of AI resources.
Like building highways instead of just one bridge. But let's get back to our investors for a minute. What are the key takeaways? What should they remember when they're making their decisions?
Well, the biggest thing is both Bittensor and Hypertensor, they're pioneers. This decentralized AI thing, it's brand new. And with anything new, there's risk. The tech is changing fast. The market's unpredictable. There's no guarantee either one will be a slam dunk.
So it's not a sure thing. It's for people who are comfortable with a little risk.
Right. It's more like investing in a startup. You've got the potential for big rewards, but you've also got to be prepared to lose.
But those potential rewards, they could be huge. If either one of these platforms really takes off, it could change everything.
Oh, absolutely. We could be talking about a whole new era for AI, more open, more accessible, where anyone can benefit.
So if you're looking for an investment that could really make a difference, that could change the world, this is it. This is the frontier.
It is. But go in with your eyes open. Understand the risks. Understand that this is a long-term play. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about being part of something much bigger.
Okay, so we've broken it down, the good, the bad, the potential. But before we go, here's one last thought. Maybe it's not about Bittensor versus Hypertensor. Maybe it's about how they can work together, learn from each other, build on each other's successes.
It's a nice thought. Competition is good, but collaboration can be even better. Imagine if they could combine their strengths, create something truly amazing.
So maybe instead of rivals, they're partners. Pioneers working together to build a better future for AI. A future that benefits everyone.
I like that. And who knows, maybe someday we'll be doing a deep dive on the Bittensor Hypertensor Alliance.
Now that's a deep dive I'd love to do. But for now, that's all the time we have. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those AI algorithms humming.